Understanding your organization and the problems you have is way more important than understanding what the vendors can offer. Okay,
Right.
we spend more time delivering and doing RFPs than we do internal assessments to understand what we really want. It's the wrong way round. You might not even need to run an RFP if you really understand the problems that you're trying to solve.
Welcome to the Contact Center Gurus, the podcast for contact center and customer experience leaders. Learn best practices, new technology, tips and tricks, and more. Listen in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Contact Center Gurus podcast. And on today's episode, I'm excited to have as our guest Wayne Butterfield, founder of STX-AI. For more than 15 years, Wayne has helped organizations navigate and thrive in the rapidly shifting landscape of AI, automation, and digital transformation. From early RPA experimentation and OCR deployments to pioneering large-scale chatbot programs and today's agentic AI capabilities, his career has been defined by a willingness to explore what's possible long before it becomes mainstream. So, Wayne, welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you, Darren. I always feel like you were describing somebody else then. It almost sounded surreal that those things were about me. So thank you for the great introduction and hello,
Well,
audience.
great
Great to
to
meet you
have
all.
you on. Obviously, AI is on everyone's mind. And today, our theme is that contact centers are drowning in AI vendor pitches, promising instant ROI. But you have spent 15 years watching organizations automate broken processes, deploy chatbots without proper data foundations, and chase shiny AI objects while ignoring fundamental operational readiness. And this episode cuts through the hype to explore why successful AI transformations start with assessment, not deployment, and what separates the organizations achieving real results from those stuck in the AI graveyard. So I put together a few questions I'd like to run through just to kind of keep us on topic and moving forward. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So Wayne, you've been working with AI in contact centers since 2010, long before ChatGPT made it the hottest topic in boardrooms. Take us back. What were the early wins? What completely failed? And what's the biggest lessons from those 15 years that contact center leaders still aren't getting today?
Oh wow. Okay. Let me take you back. Then I'll go back before 2010 because I think that's where I cut my teeth in the contact center. So I have been in and around the contact center now for over 20 years. I've had various different roles. I actually started off as a contact center advisor. It's the greatest grounding that I had in my career. Especially, I don't think you can transform a contact center unless you really have worked in one and truly understand the intricacies, the complexities, the organism. I call the contact center, it's like an organism, a living, breathing organism within an organization. And I think unless you've actually lived it, I don't really believe that you can truly transform it. So, 20 years, over 20 years in the contact center,
Were you
various
an
different
agent?
roles.
Were you ever an agent in a contact
Yeah,
center?
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I was a customer service agent,
All right.
for, 3 maybe 3 years overall. I started in at the bottom and then became a guru, like an expert agent that was on a small help desk that all other agents would contact. Then I went into management and transformation roles. So yeah, I really did cut my teeth actually in the center. And so I had various different roles, as I said. 2010 was where I started with RPA and what we now know as chatbots. Back then, it was actually a digital avatar. Now, but before I got to the technology, I'd run our back office operations. We completed about 1.6 million transactions a month in an offshore back office across somewhere in the region of about 380 different processes. Huge volume, large number of processes. Um, and I knew them all. I knew the AHTs, I knew the volumes, I knew the work, right? I'd already optimized alongside my BPO partners those processes. And in 2010, I was like, well, what now? There's only so much you can do with human labor. You can make the process as efficient as possible. You either eliminate it or make it more efficient, or it just is what it is. And in 2010 is when I kind of came across RPA. And at the same time, because I was working in the telco industry, we're also investigating kind of newer alternative technology. And a digital avatar was one of those technologies. It was a company called Creative Virtual, and so those two technologies simultaneously were things that I was working on. I grew that RPA operation to deal with about 1.2 million transactions a month, and one of the largest in the world. We had about 300 virtual bots, significant number of transactions, and then going on to the digital avatar. It was well before we had even digital messaging, WhatsApp, etc. weren't kind of there either. Online chat wasn't anything. And so it's really telling that the number one question asked of our virtual agent was, do you have a boyfriend and are you married? Okay. That's what customers were asking our digital avatar. I mean, to be fair, as far as kind of cartoons go, we didn't make her look ugly. Okay. But that didn't necessarily help. She got asked, more inappropriate questions than she did helpful ones. So, that was a really interesting thing in 2010. That is kind of how the consumers dealt with that type of technology. Um,
Mhm.
so fast forward a little bit more now, I spent probably another 5 years at O2, Telefonica O2, fine tuning those two technologies. And I spent 2 years at another telco called British Telecom doing something very similar. I basically replicated what I'd done at O2 in another organization before I got into consulting. Um, so, that was the journey. A lot of it was within and around the contact center, and a lot of it, for the last 15 plus years, has now been the deployment and optimization of these technologies, many of which we now kind of take for granted. But when you're one of the first people in the world to actually deploy some of these technologies, you learn a lot. The one thing that I really did value in all of those deployments is that I really understood what it was that I wanted to do something with. So you spoke about assessments earlier on. Would I have called it an automation assessment, etc. at that point? Automation readiness, probably not. That's what we call it now. Back then it was, I need to create a pipeline. I have these technologies. I know what my hammer is. Now I need to try and find my nails. Now we would call that an assessment. It's pretty, pretty standard play. The deployments, what did they really tell me? What did they teach me? Um, they they taught me um, that when you deploy a technology, you generally do it for a reason. And if your reason's not the right one, it's probably going to be a failure. And I'll say that with the digital avatar is that I think we did it because we thought it was cool. And we were doing it because we wanted to stand out. And I think we probably did stand out, but I don't think that necessarily generated any big return on investment. Um, but I don't know whether that was what we were aiming for in the first place, So, and I see a lot of similarities now with certainly conversational platforms within the contact center environment. A lot of people are deploying them to save money. And I'm an experienced guy, and it really frustrates me that if you want to deploy technology and you want to change the habits of people, you have to create a new experience that's better than what they're used to. And I don't think we're doing that because we're deploying things that save the business money. We're not necessarily deploying things that are better for the person using them. And I will literally die on the hill for that. And I know exactly. I can even point out to how and why I know that we're not doing that is because when I do it and when I think about it, I want to time everything. I want to live the experience. I wonder how many people who are deploying their conversational or have deployed conversational bots have actually gone through the deployed experience now, days after, weeks after, months after, and felt what it feels like to be your consumer. and I would almost guarantee 9 out of 10 times they'd say, "Ah, this is frustrating. This doesn't work. I don't like it. It takes me longer." Even if you get a resolution, and I'll give you a great example. I was in an IVR the other day for really, well-known financial institution in the US. 4 minutes, 50 seconds. I timed it on purpose because I wanted to know. And that was just to speak to a person because the IVR could not help me with my query. 5 minutes. I thought we were supposed to deploy AI so that we're always on, always available, and could help. W-
Mhm.
5 minutes. It took the person about 40 seconds to reset my account so that I could relog into my online account. That's all I wanted to do. I actually wanted to self-serve, and instead they've made me talk about this bad experience multiple times, because of how poorly designed it was. Right technology, probably great, in the right place, poorly executed, terrible experience.
That
I'll
must
get
be
off my
even
high
more
horse now.
frustrating for you. I know for me, I'm involved with AI technologies, and when I'm in a bad AI bot and I think of what the possibilities are versus what I'm experiencing, I know I get frustrated. But for you, who knows how to actually build and design, you must think to yourself, why wouldn't they have just designed it right?
Mhm.
Why, when they could have, why did they not design this AI to actually resolve things, resolve it quickly, and do what it's supposed to do?
Well, the thing is, I know why. Because they were interested in saving money. They weren't interested in creating a better experience. We place this veneer over the top of it. Let's be honest. We do place this veneer over the top. No organization will publicly state that they're trying to save money. They won't tell their people that's what they're trying to do. They guise the deployments under, oh, it's great, it's always on, it's 24/7, people are going to be available, it'll triage all these queries, our agents will get to know all of this info, you'll never have to repeat any of it, right? That's the nirvana that people sell. The reality is every time I get to speak to a person, even regardless of how long I've been in the IVR, they still need to know. They still want to know what the actual problem is, why. Um, Resolution is um, spotty. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the actual length of time, even things like, and I this is one of the things that it really bugbears me. I hate the fact that the voice in the IVR speaks so much slower than a real person. I'm like, just speed up. Come on, let's. It's frustrating just having to hear how polite he wants to be. Like most people are in a rush and they just want resolution. Like
Mhm.
I would like a rude chatbot that asks me what I want and gets me it versus something that's like, thank you so much for your custom today. We really appreciate it. I cannot wait to support you in your journey. No, just say, how can I help? Like
Yeah.
it's little things like that. And again, maybe that's a personal preference to me, but I think most of us a we don't need lots of fluff. We need resolution because our time's important. So one thing you can't buy time. So I always think, a lot of these brands I feel are stealing time from their consumers. They're saving money maybe, but they're stealing time. And that really annoys me.
Right. But I see that in human interactions too, where the
Hmm.
agent basically is reading off a script with all of this stuff, sometimes incorporating my history, but still, I just want them to stop talking so I can tell them what I need.
Hmm. Yeah,
So I'm with you
exactly.
on that. When you're working with the client, is a good part in the beginning around educating them about the importance of designing an experience
Hmm.
versus just reducing labor costs by getting AI to handle interactions in
Hmm.
place of humans?
Without a doubt. I mean, I actually won't work with people who are won't work with organizations where my principles about what and how these technologies should be used are not aligned. And so I tend to stay away where possible. And I'm hopefully in a fortunate enough position to be able to continue to do that. But I want to create some of the world's best experiences with and for my clients. And so if that and the outcome of that should be cheaper costs, but it should
Mhm.
not be the reason why we're doing it. It should, without doubt, be because we are creating an exceptional experience, a differentiated experience as well. And I'll give you like some ideas, right? Most conversational platforms are designed to try and remove calls from people, which is fine. That's where you get your call saving from. Um, there's a lot of queries. I mean, I can't remember the last time I actually had a query resolved by an IVR chatbot. Okay, so I still speak to the person, yet they are paying for this technology as well. Most people now are so frustrated with other people's chatbots. It doesn't matter how great yours is; they probably still want to try and bypass it, and so they're still pushing for agent, agent, agent. I hear my girlfriend all the time. You know, she representative, representative. And I'm like, oh, you know, I was like, I wonder whether that actually was a good experience, you know, whether that could have been a good one, but people are ignoring them now.
Mhm.
Okay. And so they're putting these things in place. Okay. So now what happens is it's like, okay, I'll transfer you to a representative and then you're on hold. I just wonder, like, if you're really going to design these things, it's like, great, I hear you. Okay, I'm going to put you through to a representative. The whole time is going to be 6 minutes. Just while we're waiting, just work with me a little bit. Let me just gather some information, okay, about what your actual problem is. You're speaking to a person. Don't worry, a person's coming. I just want to make sure there's some information I can pass to them. Why don't we do that? Okay, it's there are different ways. It's just like a different way of thinking about those cases now. Like we've lost the trust of the general public. So even something like that, okay, I will put you on hold, but while you're going on hold, let's just see what we can do. I wonder how many more customers we might be able to win over and resolve before it still lands with a person. I don't know any organization doing that. I mean, I would love it if somebody can highlight an organization that's doing that. All that is just thinking about an issue in a slightly different way. Like, how could we do this differently? Right? We've got them on the phone already. We're putting them through to an advisor. And if you look at hold times now, they're actually high. The hold times in a lot of the data I look at are higher now than what they were before AI. And you know what happened is because we reduced all these people. We said AI was going to be the savior. AI wasn't the savior, and we haven't increased the people back. And so now the customer experience is even worse because you have a horrible experience with a bot that you never designed properly. And then you're waiting longer to speak to a person, so you're doubly annoyed. And then we call this progress. Um, so you know, but I think there are, even if that was the outcome that we had created, you know, because we'd reduced people, hold times going up. Let's use that to our advantage. Again, if we design the technology and the capability differently, if we've got them on hold, they can't leave now. They know they're going to speak to a person. Let's just try
Mhm.
and rethink through how we could utilize that time and
Mhm.
still maybe get a customer to be able to self-serve, even though they came on the phone absolutely saying that they wanted to speak to a human. So it's little
Mhm.
things like that that, you know, if you build that into your design, and again, I'm a big design principles perspective. It's like, you know, I like a lot of research. I like customer interviews. I like to always know from the person who's using its perspective, not the internal company. Like we have this perception of what we think is the right thing to do, and then you kind of put it in the hands of a customer, and you know everybody uses things in different ways. Conversational platforms, the contact center is no different. The other thing is, and you'll love this one, is that we the only time a lot of brands ever speak to their customer is when they phone into the contact center. And yet we treat that like it is the worst thing that could possibly ever happen to us as a brand. It's like, oh, they want to phone in, they want to speak to us. I'm like, oh my goodness, they want to speak to us. Fantastic. Let's ask them how they're finding the product. Um,
Mhm.
let's get insight. Okay, competitor analysis. How do you find the price? All of these things, right? There's always a reason. there's always insight that you can get. Now, historically, we expect an agent to write all of this stuff down. Never going to work. Okay. But now we have automation on the agent side. So in theory, they should be able to do a lot more autonomously,
Mhm.
yet they're still there with the customer. What historically used to happen is they used to put customers on hold, like, I'll do that for you. And the reason why they put customers on hold was A, they didn't know the answer, or B, they didn't like small talk because they didn't really know what to say. And so they're there kind of changing the address, placing the order, tap, tap, tapping away, and then they go back to the customer. Now a lot of that kind of tap, tap, tapping has been automated by RPA, Agent Assist, etc. You can do two things. You can make the call shorter, or you could start to turn that inbound call into an opportunity to get insight about your brand and all of these good things. And why wouldn't you do that? Because who likes filling surveys in? Okay, who really gets honest feedback? We talk about sentiment analysis. The best, the best output and outcome you're going to get from sentiment analysis is when you're actually asking customers not about the issue that they have. Okay, because clearly, if people have a problem, they're probably going to be pissed off. Okay, if somebody resolves it, they're probably going to be happy. But what do they
Mhm.
feel about your brand? We talk about NPS and all of these things. Again, we have a real opportunity to act differently with the outcomes that we end up creating, whether it be the inbound call, the IVR experience, all of these things. And it's not rocket science. It's just good design, and it's having good principles. Like, what do we want to stand for? What do we want our experience to feel like? And do you know what? It might take a bit longer. It might cost you a bit more money. You might not generate as much savings, but I guarantee that you will at this point offer a differentiated service compared to everybody else who's trying to save money, put AI first, AI for everything, and then create really bad experiences when we actually do have to speak to a person. Again, you only have to be good to be phenomenal right now, I would suggest.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. So we see a lot of data. There's reports and articles every week about how clients are failing when they just go right to sourcing an AI chatbot
Mhm,
without ever doing an AI readiness assessment or
mhm,
looking at design or any of these other things. They just, they want to automate interactions, reduce labor costs, and hopefully improve efficiency in the process. But but ultimately, when someone's gone through an AI assessment and you've looked at their topography and their data and everything else to make sure it's all in alignment, that they're even in a good state to be prepared to adopt AI. And you start with experience design first, and then technology and everything else second. So what does it look like for you when you're doing an AI readiness assessment with the client? And then how does this process actually improve the potential results the client's going to have when they've adopted the AI that you probably helped guide them to?
mhm. Well, I think it's AI or technology or change or anything. I think that's the one thing we should, again, just kind of be mindful of here is that AI is pretty much infused into every technology. But I think you referenced it. I'm a problem first guy. I want to create great experiences, but I'm always about the problem first. Like, what are we actually trying to solve here? You mentioned right at the very start, vendor pitches everywhere, which is great, and vendors solve problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have the problem or the shape of the problem that that vendor is trying to sell. Every vendor kind of has its own target market and what it thinks is the solution and the right solution for you. Um, I don't understand how you can truly agree with a third party vendor on what they're selling until you really understand what it is that you need, right? And so again, my process, let's say, is really to understand problem. Then what do you want to do? So we talk about experience, that's requirements. So requirements and experience, kind of creation and all of those things. Like, what is it that we want to really, really build? And then at that point, it could be depending on the organization, could want to build something. You may already have existing capability in, let's just say that you're using a CCaaS provider and now you want to move to a conversational platform. Now, you could, in theory, use this, and this one, or your CCaaS provider. Use NICE as an example. Have acquired a market-leading capability called Cognigy. Right? My yeah, as long as your requirements and experience, as long as Cognigy could get 9 out of 10 of the things that you want, the fact is, you already have a contractual agreement. You already have a deep integration because you already have the IVR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you don't need a big sourcing process to get
Mhm.
to a very similar answer. The thing with technology right now, Darren, is most of it is so similar that the only difference is what you do with it, right? Again, going back to designing the experience, designing your outcomes, really understanding what you want to achieve. Most vendors can deliver almost any experience that you want. They may have a vanilla that is there. This is what we deliver, and that may be a vanilla experience that everyone's dealing with right now. There are some really specialized implementation organizations around the world who focus purely in and around delivering differentiated experience. They're technology agnostic. Well, how can you create differentiated experiences when you could use any technology? That just tells me everything I need to know. Most of the time, it's not the technology that you choose, it's how you chose to deliver it. Okay. And what your principles were and, how you felt about, experience over cost saving or, what was the rationale for why you wanted to do that. So, that continues to give me, I guess still gives me like a warm, fuzzy feeling that even in this age of AI, that what you do and how you design and what you deliver should far outweigh. And again, this is why understanding your organization is really important. Understanding your organization and the problems you have is way more important than understanding what the vendors can offer. Okay.
Right.
We spend more time delivering and doing RFPs than we do internal assessments to understand what we really want. There's a wrong way round. You might not even need to run an RFP if you really understand the problems that you're trying to solve, right? And some of these RFPs are they're not cheap, right? You
Right.
bring in a third party, there's $250,000 easy, plus all the internal resource and all of those things. So again, I think we have there's an imbalance between um, we got to have AI, vendors have AI, therefore we need vendors versus really understanding us and our size, because the size of the organization, the industry of the organization, you mentioned AI readiness. If we don't, you know, it, again, depending on industry, regulation, etc., will also then determine the type of technology that you can deploy. So, for example, it's much easier in a CPG, consumer product goods organization, to probably go ahead and be pretty bullish on things like large language models in your IVR. Probably going to be a little bit more of a difficult one to do in healthcare. Okay,
Right.
where I think we really do need to use less set and scripted answers. But at the same time, we're in a highly regulated industry. And so you don't want free reign. Whereas if I'm asking you where my new Adidas sneakers are, do you know what? I'm pretty confident that you're not really going to be hallucinating. If you did, it's not really that much of an issue. If you start
Yeah.
hallucinating over an ailment that I have and make me think I've got cancer or something, wow, that's a very, very different kettle of fish, as we'd say in the UK. So, again, really understanding who you are, your industry, your regulations, and all of that good stuff is you know really important. Well before you get to the vendor space.
Yep. I've seen in my time in the industry, there's a lot of companies that want to, I call them do-it-yourselfers. The
Hmm.
same folks around the house, anything needs to be done. I hire a professional that does that all day long and can do it better than me. And I stay in my lane. I know what my core competencies are, and it's not fixing anything around the house. But a lot of contact centers have that kind of outlook, and they want to try to do it all themselves. Uh, AI readiness, though, and unless there's a whole bunch of staff members that are, AI consultants and
Hmm.
have had a lot of experience in, designing AI experiences, it just seems to me like it probably makes a lot of sense for that to be something they outsource as far as who they bring in to look at what they're doing now, what the requirements are, their
Hmm.
goals, why they're doing it, the experience they want to create, and then, ultimately building towards getting to the point eventually where it's time to look for a vendor that is a good match for that. But would you agree with me on that? Do you think that's something that companies can easily handle on their own? Or should they be looking to experts like yourself when considering AI?
I guess it always depends. I think there's kind of two chains of thought here, and I think I call it hand holding, right? So there's two types of support you could get. You could get tip of the spear, or you could get the third party tank brigade rolling in with like 15 people. And so you kind of have these two areas of support. Clearly I'm a tip of the spear type of guy. Um, and having been on the other end of having 50 people swarming over my organization that I've worked in, and then also being the solitary person who is not necessarily the kind of oracle, right? The guide of an organization as you're guiding them through. And the reason why I think having a guide is so much better is because you if y- if you're if you are in an organization right now, it is incredibly difficult to cut through hype, hysteria, um, the latest and greatest news, the vendor stuff. It's like, who in your organization is actually going to do that?
Mhm.
One person, everybody. Like, that's what I do, on a daily basis, right? But I also have so much experience of being able to say, okay, I can take that, store it, and it's good to know. I know what the hype is. I know how organizations work. Like, I worked in a couple of the biggest enterprises in Europe, second biggest telco in the world. Like, I know how big organizations work, and it's very, very different to how many startups see the world, right? Certainly in the contact center. If I got a dime for every organization I said that we're going to end the contact center over the last 10 years, and yet it's still a budding industry full of complexity, and actually more complexity now than it's ever had. Actually, it's not got simpler, it's got harder. And yet organizations who don't know this have spent you know decades trying to decimate it without real success. So having somebody who kind of is a guide, who knows where to push, knows where to prod, um, knows the background of, okay, what we're going to do now, and has some kind of methodology to be able to take an organization from what do we want to achieve and why, to deploying capabilities, and setting up teams who continually optimize. Because let's put it this way, AI is not a one and done. AI is now a living, breathing part of your contact center. It's the silicon workforce, right? We have HR departments for people. I'm not necessarily going to call them HR for our silicon workers, but we do need something, right? They need the equivalent of HR in order to stay current, stay accurate, stay online, and stay helpful. And so, having somebody who can help you through that journey is, I would say, uh, absolutely needed. And that's not to say that people in every organization can't know AI. That's fine. But who's pulling the strings together across all of these organizations and ensuring, departments, etc., and ensuring that we're all pulling in the same way. And you know what? A lot of organizations, they listen to somebody externally more than they listen to somebody internally. I don't know why. Um, but if you're paying for a third party, more people seem to listen to them versus because, there's no kind of conflict. There's no animosity. There's no, well, I don't like that person. When you're all in different teams, you work together on a daily basis. You've probably had successful projects, not successful projects. And so you're probably not as open to collaborating. With everybody internally as much as you might be with somebody externally. And I've seen that, many, many times.
Yeah. By the way, that whole analogy there with HR for the Silicon uh, employees is brilliant. I've never heard anyone put it like that. I love it. Um, well done. Next, I want to get into agentic AI. Everyone's talking about agentic AI, and it's being called the next evolution beyond chatbots and generative AI. So, for contact center leaders trying to cut through the buzzwords, break down what agentic AI actually means, what's the reality of how companies can use it today? Well, first, I'd love to hear your definition of what
Hmm.
it is, and then how companies could be using it today
Hmm.
um, versus
Okay.
what's experimental.
Mm. Okay, so there's a couple of things here to kind of note. So, first of all, I'm going to say that most organizations who are claiming some form of agentic AI right now, it's just a marketing rebrand. So, if I was a contact center leader wondering whether or not, I needed agentic AI right now, if you've ever heard of something called intelligent automation or
Mhm,
even, conversational AI that can complete actions, you're
mhm,
not that far away from what people are now calling agentic AI. So, classify it as more of a rebrand of older technology in order for it to sound more current. That's what's actually happening in the market. Okay. The reality is my view on agentic is that the future of how work gets done is going
mhm,
to change. Um, but we're not there yet in the main. And I've seen so many demos from providers, and in my old role, I used to have an Accenture, a TCS, a Wipro, an Infosys, a Cognizant. One of them pretty much every week showing off their agentic capabilities, and it was basically just RPA, OCR, intelligent document processing, and a few other things. Maybe there's a little bit of Gen AI in there as well. The reality is, it was just automation. Um, True agentic to me is it removes parts of the way that we work right now. And the way I think about work is that there is a start, a middle, and an end. Right. The start is the input, understanding the query, what it is that people want, getting the information that they need, okay, in order to complete that. The middle is the transacting on the CRMs and the systems, okay, and the end is the updating of the database in the background as a result of the changes you made in the middle, right? That's the process. That's in theory that's what we do in the contact center, in back office, and we have these convoluted processes of what we change and where and why. Okay, they're the process rules. The systems are what we do the changes on, and the back end database is kind of our storage location for all of these customer records and whatever else. Agentic, in theory, still needs the input. Okay. So it still needs to understand what the task is and the information that it needs to update. But the last thing it wants to do, an agentic AI, the last thing it wants to do is work through a CRM, an ERP, or a load of systems. That is actually the kryptonite. Our GUIs, we call them GUIs, right? Graphical user interfaces, are the kryptonite of agentic AI. We spent the last 15 years automating on the front end, okay? And it's a nightmare, a nightmare. Even now, um, when, not necessarily when screens move, but historically, if a field changed the name, automations broke. Now, okay, what people are calling agentic, we've got a little bit more now. So we know if it moved, it's fine. I still know it's that because it's still called the same. It's just on a different part of the screen. Great. Still same process though. We haven't actually increased the amount of automation we've done. All we've done is we've stopped it breaking a bit more.
Mhm.
The way to completely remove all of this, and I call these agentic APIs. Okay. If you have this input layer, the agentic API knows what it's doing. Instead of going through this convoluted process, the agentic API has a few kind of capabilities. It knows business rules, okay, and it knows whereabouts in the back end it needs to make updates in order for this process to be completed. You just remove that complete middle bit. And so agentic API, agentic automation is in theory going to be the removal of the GUI from processing. That is how I kind of see where we're maneuvering to with agentic automation. The reality is we're not there yet. The reality is we're talking about agentic. Really, we're just talking about intelligent automation. And the funny thing is, I think the IVR might actually be the first place where true agentic APIs and automation thrive. Why? Because we don't actually access systems in IVRs anyway. So we already kind of have I don't know, like the shell and the way of working in the IVR that I think is where you're going to see. I would think it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to start with agentic in the IVR than it will be in the back office because we have loads of humans accessing systems, etc. Your Salesforces, your ServiceNows, your Oracles, you name it, right? We already have that. In the IVR, most of the time, we're accessing information via APIs anyway. If we can add some intelligence into these APIs, if we can unlimit them so that they're able to do more, and we program them to be able to do more, suddenly, instead of only being able to do 3 things in the IVR, you might be able to do everything in the IVR. And the IVR might actually be the place that you actually start directing more traffic to the IVR because of that ability to get stuff done.
Mhm.
So that it's still even now a bit of a wild west in this kind of agentic space, but that's kind of my take on it. It's not an evolution of what we do now. It's the complete transformation of it. It potentially is the decimation of the CRM, the ERP industry as we know it right now. Um, and that just doesn't happen overnight. So anyone who is worried about, you know, that the fact that they haven't deployed agentic automation yet really, really shouldn't be worried because the reality is that this is going to be a journey over the next kind of 2 to 3 years as we really try and figure out, okay, if we do remove a Salesforce from the picture, what do we put in its place? How do agents still check all of these things? There's so much kind of governance and operating model and other things that need to be thought through before I think most organizations are even ready for these technologies that I wouldn't even worry about it. I'm not worried about it. I like to think about it. I like to ponder on it. I like to ask what if questions, but I'm not worried that tomorrow, agentic AI is going to be everywhere because it really isn't. And there's so much hype, as we film this, you've got kind of OpenClaw and ClaudeBot and Maltbook and all of these things, right? It's really going off with all of these autonomous agents creating their own Facebooks and things like that. It's like the reality is this is almost like AI broke out of a lab. It's now in the hands of people who know how to do stuff, not necessarily build enterprise software, but they know how to code. And now everyone's coding all of this stuff It gets really famous on X. Then it starts to seep into LinkedIn, and suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, if I don't deploy OpenClaw tomorrow, our business is going to be decimated. No, if you deploy OpenClaw tomorrow, your business is going to be hacked and you're going to be out of business. I tend to, even though I'm in the hype, I tend to take all of it with a pinch of salt, as should the listeners.
So let's run through this example. So let's say you've got a client, 1,000-seat call center. Maybe they're in banking, for example, and they've done all the right things. They've met with you multiple times. They've talked through the experience that they'd like to design, and they've walked through why they're considering AI and what are the requirements and desired outcomes and all of these things. And you finally get to the point where it's clear to you that yes, AI could benefit this organization, and it's time to help them with procuring the right solutions provider or looking to see if within their incumbent
Hmm.
solutions provider what they desire can be built. What what is the potential for that organization once they've deployed AI, what's that gonna mean to them? What's it gonna mean to their operations, to their customer experience? What benefits might they see or savings might they see?
Hmm.
So if they're doing everything right and utilizing the technology that's available now through
Hmm.
vendors you're familiar with, what's the possibilities?
Well, the possibilities are what everyone's talking about, but just not what everyone is actually realizing. So, 24/7 service that resolves, that people like using, with people as fallbacks, happy customers, differentiated services, allowing for client-based growth, award-winning. These are all the things that I think if you get this right, as I mentioned it before, you only have to be good to be amazing right now. Okay? You only have to after something that's good. So all of the things that the average organization is claiming, which aren't true, you if you that's it. You will achieve the things that everyone's claiming they're achieving, but the reality is that consumers do not believe it. You actually will have consumers that believe you. And we do talk about the experience economy, and I'm not kidding. If you had a bad experience, what's the stats? You tell 10 people. I guarantee I've told 10 people, 10 individuals. Plus, I've been on 3 podcasts where I've spoken about the Merrill Lynch example in the IVR. Right, so I probably told 1,000 people about my 5 minutes of hell in their IVR. Um, you know, you won't be one of those people, right? You will be positively spoken about from an experience perspective. Um, you will end up saving money because your containment, so the number of customers that willingly stay within your designed experience, is as you need it to be, as you would like it to be, if not higher, because you actually are creating something that people want to use, as opposed to forcing people to use something that you have told them they have to. There's a big difference here. And then you will get those positive, there will be revenue growth on the back of it because you have ended up creating a great experience. When people do end up coming through to you, hopefully you've got enough bandwidth, because this is not a people out play. You've got enough bandwidth to then start actually spending longer with your customers, probably because they've got more of a complex issue, number one. But number two, because you genuinely want to know, what do they think? How do they like the brand? What about the product? Get insight out of them. Treat that call, that contact as gold, not as sludge, right? Not as sewage, right? It's a good thing. Maximize it. Um, have that contact mind. Have all of those contacts mind, and then you've got an end-to-end really good understanding of the quality of the calls that you have with your voice bot. the quality of the calls that you have with your people. You've obviously got a differentiated experience because you designed for experience, not designed for cost saving. Like, I don't know, there's so many positive things. And again, that's the that that sounds great. Everyone's claiming a lot of that. Yeah, I know. I still don't see it. Like, and again, if anyone is listening and can point me in the direction of a digital and AI experience that they have that they think is really great, then I would be really appreciative because I love data and I love research and I love living experiences. So positive ones only, though, please, because I've had enough of the dodgy ones today.
Yeah. Awesome. So, so you've worked for major enterprises like Telefonica and BT on transformation projects, and now you're consulting with organizations as a fractional chief AI officer. So when you walk into a contact center that's been burned by failed AI projects, what are the three things you look at first to diagnose what went wrong?
Hmm.
What's the minimum bar for an organization that they need to clear before they're actually ready for AI development? And
Hmm.
anything else you'd like to share?
I think you got to start with with why, what went wrong, and why, and I think that's generally going to be, probably for a number of reasons, right? Probably started with poor data, and I'll give you an example. In 2012, maybe,
Hmm.
I was running the transformation roadmap at Telefonica, and if we looked at every initiative that we were going to deliver that year, we were going to take the number of inbound contacts that we were receiving from, I think, 4.2 down to zero. 4.2 million down to zero. If we delivered everything as it was on our roadmap, never going to happen, right? But it was things like online billing, moving from paper bills to online. I mean, we're talking here, nearly 15 years ago now. So, now we take for granted getting all of our invoices online. The reality was we were still delivering paper bills back then. And people would look at those paper bills because they'd open their mail and they'd be like, oh, there's a charge there, or I don't recognize that. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, right? Would you really be that bothered about a 30 pence increase in your bill if you didn't see it and you just came out of your auto pay? No, you'd be fine with that. But you
Yeah.
see it on paper and it's a 30p charge, and it's probably legitimate. It was a text message to, a friend over in India or somewhere like that, which is a legitimate charge. But because you saw it on a paper bill, you phoned up. So, we had things like that, self-service, we had the mobile app, we had loads of stuff going on. Anyway, the reality was we delivered all of these initiatives and we still had 3.2 million calls coming in. So how do you go from, we saved 1 million calls, amazing,
Hmm.
but the data told us that we were supposed to reduce all calls. We were never going to do that. The reason was, like many initiatives kind of overlapped. The problem was our data was collected by customer service agents on the phone. And so what they were doing is they weren't interested in accuracy, they were interested in speed. And so, they weren't necessarily categorizing the reasons why people were calling. And this was the days before you had kind of call analytics. So unless you're going to listen to, over 4 million calls a month to understand why people are contacting you, you're going to have dodgy data. And again, we base that on dodgy data. That is one of the things that I would always be looking at in any failed implementation. It's like, what was the data? What was the data foundations that we had that told us our impact was going to be X, and it ended up being Y? Okay, so were our calculations off to start with? I.e., we were building on sand, or we were building on quicksand. What do we expect? Or, did we build on cement, but actually we got it wrong. It was a dodgy build. It was a poor design. We didn't have any of the integrations that we wanted. We didn't design the experience as well as what we could have done. We didn't. The other one's adoption, right? This is a big thing that I spend a lot of my time doing now is it's not about buying tools, it's about getting the most out of the tools you already have. Adoption of AI is a change management capability that nobody wants to invest in, but is the big difference between getting value for money and creating shelfware. Uh, I'm seeing it. I see it in every organization that I go in. I'm like, it's not about buying AI. It's about the process. The process of using AI doesn't end with buying it. It actually starts. It's actually after then is the difference between whether or not you're actually going to get value from it or not. And again, this all this kind of the procurement process takes you to a point. Great, we've got it in, we've implemented it. Now what? Well, tracking usage, understanding pain points, what's working, what's not working, getting vendor monthly sessions in the diary to really understand, work through bugs, issues, etc. And again, that would be another, what was the post deployment? There was a post deployment scaffolding around adoption and usage, right? How well
Mhm.
did we actually treat the AI as a capability as opposed to a technology? What was the continued investment in time, data, and understanding, etc. So they're the types of things that I would go into in any organization, whether things have been successful or not. Because the other thing is something successful? Why? And how do you replicate that? Sometimes we're always looking for the problem, and therefore fail to realize what actually has really worked. Because when something works, you don't concentrate on it, which actually I think is a bit of a miss. Because when
Mhm.
something works, what we should really figure out is why. What is
Yeah.
it about this that worked when these six other things didn't? Um, and then, again, how do you then replicate the good in the failures? So, again, that's just, some of the things that I think about. If you're going in, again, unlikely but not impossible to be the technology. Therefore, what did we do wrong as an organization to make this a success? It's very quick to blame the technology and swap it out. Guess what? 9 times out of 10, swapping out the technology, unless it's a step change. Okay. So going from AI 1.0 to AI 10.0, yeah, you should swap that out. Going from 1.1 to 1.2, it's unlikely to be the technology. And if it was the technology, your slight uplift in capability, not going to change. Okay. You need to make a meaningful change if you actually are going to swap out technology A to technology B. There has to be good rationale for it. So again, there's a fair few things there, Darren, that I would kind of go in and be looking in and at. And I don't think once did I actually mention the actual technology, which I think is pretty telling.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So, you're a fractional chief AI officer and chief transformation officer for organizations right now. Um, Maybe just kind of dig in, kind of what you do.
Hmm.
How are you helping companies? What are you doing for them?
Hmm.
What specific ways are you helping them to transform?
Hmm. Well, it's a bit of everything. I love it because it's like being a consultant where you actually get to truly deliver.
Hmm.
So I take on roles where I become part of the furniture. I get my own IDs. I have all my own teams. I'm an employee, auto signatures, etc., etc. I just do it on a more of a part time basis. And what do I do? Well, it really again, you start with what are the problems, right? What are we trying to do as an organization? Sometimes it's we need to adopt new tools. Sometimes if we've got a long list of issues that we want to try and fix, and we want to know whether AI is the right thing to do. So I'll give you some examples. I'm building things like training programs, landing pages, prompt libraries, adoption plans for capabilities that are there, setting up vendor demos, vendor steering codes that we already have, actually putting some governance in place where we can talk about, AI at very, very senior levels, and run through, plans, ambitions and progress. So it literally is just it's a hodgepodge of activities that are all geared towards, and I call it raising the tide, or rising the tide, right? It's taking the goodness from those early adopters. It's taking the willingness of people, but without education of the kind of middles, and then it's kind of pushing along those who are worried into a place where they feel more secure at an enterprise level, and doing that through conversation, education, and gamification as well in places. So doing it through those three things. I'll be honest, it's probably more than a full-time job in most organizations that I work in. And so my biggest issue is, how do you actually prioritize what's important in each of the different scenarios? Because it's an incredibly challenging and rewarding and busy thing to do. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of insight. And again, there's no one size fits all. Every organization I've worked in doing this, different issues, different challenges, different levels of maturity, different ambitions, different industries. So it's every role is different. But that whole my methodol my kind of aim is to rise the tide, and every person I speak to, I tell them that my aim for them and for the organization is that they get to work just as hard in less hours, right? You bring people on side. I deploy AI because I want us to all only work 3 days a week, 4 hours a day, and spend the rest of the time on the beach. Like, that's my North Star, right? I don't want to work myself into a grave. I want to work myself towards the beach. And that's
Love
what
it.
I tell everybody I speak with. I'm like, my role is to do that for everyone. So I gain,
Love
everyone likes me as a result, by the way. The managers don't. They're like, don't be telling my employees that. No, we need them to do more. I'm like, no, it's definitely like, that's what drives me. Like, can I help organizations use AI so that every person in that organization is happier? And when I achieve that, I'll die a happy man.
That's amazing. That's a good point to end on. That was fantastic. And I will get your contact information and everything, and I'll make sure that that's included in the podcast and that it's in the notes so people can reach out to you. I know that probably there'll be several wanting to reach out, assuming they found that perfect AI example of one that they've used that has worked really, really well that they want you to see. Um, and if they want to talk to you about their organization, are you available for new clients?
I mean, you can never say no to new clients, but I am very busy. And one of the things I will always do, I will always have conversations, and I will. I think you've got to kind of drink from the fire hydrant, and so conversations, I think, are the foundation of any relationship, any new relationship. So I am always available to have conversations with people. Can I take on new clients? Will always depend on when and what, etc. But I will always have conversations, Darren, as you know, this is one of a few that we've had ourselves, right? So it's I'll always make time for that.
Outstanding. Well, we'll include your information. Wayne, this has been a pleasure. It's one of the most compelling AI conversations I've had. I think there's a lot in this conversation for our listeners, and I thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Darren, and thanks for everyone for listening.